58 years of life, 32 of them dedicated entirely to my son. And this is how it all fell apart. I was preparing Sunday lunch, as I always did, when he walked into the kitchen with that expression I'd known since he was a child. It was the same look he had whenever he needed to tell me something difficult. Except this time, there was something different about it. He sat down at the table, took a deep breath and said, "Mom, we need to talk seriously." My son was never one to beat around the bush. He took after his father in that sense, so I already knew what was coming wouldn't be easy. But nothing, absolutely nothing could have prepared me for what he said next. "Sophia told me I have to decide. It's you or her. I have to choose." I kept stirring the beans on the stove because I didn't know what else to do. My legs were shaking, but I couldn't let him notice. My son was standing there, 32 years old, telling me that his wife had given him an absurd ultimatum about our relationship. I wanted to scream, wanted to shake him and ask how this was possible, but I stayed quiet and still, trying to make sense of it all. "What do you mean by that, son?" I asked. He started explaining, and each sentence that came out of his mouth hurt more than the last. Sophia had always been jealous of our relationship. I'd known that from the beginning. I could see it in her eyes, that little hint of resentment every time my son and I talked about anything. She came from a troubled family, absent mother, alcoholic father, and I don't think she ever knew what it was like to have a truly present mother figure. But I tried. I swear to God, I tried to include that girl in our family. I made lunches, brought gifts, offered help when they were having financial difficulties. 6 years of marriage, 6 years in which I walked on eggshells so as not to displease her, so as not to seem like the meddling mother-in-law. And still, it wasn't enough. "She said she can't take sharing my attention anymore," my son continued, looking down, unable to meet my eyes. "She said that every time we come here, I act differently, that you manipulate me, that our relationship isn't healthy." Manipulate. That word hurt more than any other. Me, who had worked 2 jobs to pay for his college, who had held his hand through every difficult moment in his life, was being accused of manipulation. I turned off the stove and finally turned to face him. "And you believe that?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately, and it was in that pause that I understood the gravity of the situation. My son was actually considering distancing himself from me because of her. "I love her, Mom," was all he could say, as if that justified everything, as if love were a license to destroy other bonds. In that moment, it wasn't just tears wanting to come out. I felt enormous anger, indignation, sadness, mixed with a feeling of betrayal I had never experienced before. I spent the following week in a state of numbness I didn't know existed. I couldn't sleep properly, would wake up in the middle of the night thinking about that conversation, replaying every word, every expression on my son's face. Had I really been so blind? Had I unknowingly created an emotional dependence in him? I questioned everything, absolutely everything about my motherhood. I called my sister, the only person I could fully trust, and poured my heart out. She was outraged, told me I wasn't to blame for anything, that Sophia was manipulative and was gradually isolating my son. I decided to give them space. I thought maybe that's what they needed, time to breathe, for him to realize on his own that this was absurd. 2 weeks passed without news. 2 weeks when the phone didn't ring, when I didn't receive a single message. Each day that passed, the hole in my chest grew larger. I started noticing small things that had previously gone unnoticed. I remembered moments when Sophia would change the subject when I suggested a family outing, or when she would quickly shift topics whenever I mentioned any childhood memory of my son. The signs had been there all along, but I had chosen to ignore them, hoping things would naturally improve. What an illusion that was. Then something happened that changed everything. A friend of mine who works at the same hospital as Sophia called me. "Look, I didn't want to interfere, but I think you need to know something." She had overheard Sophia talking to a colleague during their shift break. She said she finally got what she wanted, that your son was distancing himself from you, and that soon, very soon, you would be completely out of their lives. And she laughed. She laughed while saying it. I felt rage rising in my throat. That woman wasn't just jealous or insecure. She was deliberately destroying the relationship between me and my son, and worse, she was enjoying it. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to wait passively anymore. I was going to their house, and I was going to talk, going to lay everything out in the open once and for all. I got there late Thursday afternoon. Sophia opened the door, and the smile she tried to force didn't hide her discomfort at seeing me. "Hi, Mrs. Aurora. I didn't know you were coming," she said, almost closing the door. "Well, I decided to show up unannounced. Is my son here?" She froze, but eventually let me in. The house was different. The photos that used to be on the shelf, those family photos of ours, were gone. In their place were only portraits of her and him, as if I had never existed in that story. When my son appeared in the living room, I saw he looked worn down with a sad expression. "Mom, what are you doing here?" he asked, but there was no warmth in that voice. There was annoyance. So I decided I wasn't going to hold back what needed to be said anymore. "I came here because I need you to look me in the eyes and tell me the truth. Do you really believe I'm a manipulative mother? Do you really think everything I did for you all these years was to control you?" My son looked away, and it was Sophia who answered. "Mrs. Aurora, with all due respect, but I think that's exactly the problem. You can't see that there is indeed an emotional dependence here. He can't make decisions without first thinking about what you'll think." I looked at her, at that woman who was trying to rewrite the narrative of my life, of my motherhood, and responded, "Sophia, I understand you had a difficult childhood. I understand you may not have had the example of a present mother, but that doesn't give you the right to destroy the relationship between me and my son." Her expression completely changed. "Destroy? You're the one who can't accept that he's grown up, that he has a family now." I could have screamed, could have attacked, but I stayed calm. Family isn't exclusive, girl. I never asked him to choose between me and you. You're the one who did that. That's when my son finally spoke, and what he said destroyed me more than anything until then. "Mom, I think you'd better leave. We need some time." Time. That word again. How much more time would I need to give? How much time until he realized what was happening? I grabbed my purse, walked to the door, but before leaving, I turned one last time. "I just want you to know one thing, son. When you realize the mistake you're making, when all this falls apart, and it will fall apart, I'll be here, because a mother doesn't abandon her child. But know that this choice will leave scars that may never completely heal." I left that house with wobbly legs, got in the car, and only then let the tears fall. I cried like I hadn't cried in years, cried for everything I was losing, for his blindness, for her cruelty, for the injustice of it all. 3 months passed, 3 months in which silence was my only companion. I tried to keep busy, went back to attending church, started doing crafts, anything to avoid thinking about the emptiness my life had become. My friends tried to cheer me up. My sister called every day, but nothing filled the hole my son had left. And then, on a rainy Tuesday in August, the phone rang. It was him. "Mom, can you come here? I need you." His voice was desperate. I didn't think twice. When I arrived at their house, the scene I found shocked me. My son was sitting on the living room floor, surrounded by papers, with red and swollen eyes. "What happened?" I asked, kneeling beside him. And that's when he told me everything. Sophia was having an affair. For months she'd been meeting with a doctor from the hospital where she worked. Worse than that, she had opened accounts in his name, racked up enormous debts, and was now asking for a divorce and wanting half of everything. "She planned it all, Mom," he sobbed. "She distanced me from you so I wouldn't have anyone to advise me, so I'd be dependent only on her. and I was stupid enough to let it happen. I hugged my son right there, on the cold floor of that room that was no longer a home, and let him cry in my lap like he did when he was a child. My son decided to move back to my house while he sorted out the mess his life had become. The divorce was ugly, full of accusations and lies. Sophia tried to play the victim, spread to anyone who would listen that he was abusive, that I had manipulated everything to destroy their marriage. But the truth always comes out. Evidence of the affairs, the debts, the financial fraud appeared one by one. She even tried to say she was pregnant to keep him, but that wasn't true either. It was one of the most difficult phases we faced together, but at least we were together again. One night, late, we were sitting on the porch drinking tea when he finally brought up the subject that had been hanging between us since he'd come back. "Mom, I need to ask your forgiveness. I don't know how I was capable of choosing her over you. I don't know how I let her plant those ideas in my head." I held his hand, that hand I had held so many times throughout his life. "Son, love blinds us. We make wrong choices when we're in love. I don't hold a grudge against you." And it was true. Of course I had hurt feelings. Of course those months had left wounds. But I didn't hold a grudge. He was my son, my only son. "But there's something I need to tell you," I continued, choosing my words carefully. "This experience changed something between us. Not because I love you less, but because now there's a scar that will always be there. And that's okay. Scars are part of life." He agreed in silence, and I saw in his eyes that he understood. In the following months, we rebuilt our relationship. It wasn't like before, and I don't think it ever would be, but it was honest, it was real. He started therapy, started understanding the patterns he had followed, the red flags he had ignored. He learned the hard way that family is what stands by your side in the worst moments, not just the best ones. And he also learned that true love doesn't require you to abandon those who have always loved you to prove your loyalty. Today, 2 years after all that, I see my son rebuilt. He's dating a kind girl who came to my house, met me, talked to me with great respect and affection. She's not afraid to share him with me because she knows it's not a competition. She understands that a mother's presence in her son's life doesn't diminish the wife's space. On the contrary, it enriches it. Looking back, those days when I thought I'd lost my son forever were the darkest of my life. But they also taught me something precious about resilience, about forgiveness. I learned that sometimes the people we love will disappoint us, will make choices that hurt us deeply, but that doesn't mean we have to give up on them. I also learned that there are people in the world who use love as a tool for manipulation, who isolate and destroy to maintain control, and that we need to be alert to the signs. If I could go back in time, I would have been firmer from the beginning, would have set clearer boundaries with Sophia, would have talked to my son about what I was seeing. But you can't change the past, only learn from it. And I learned. I learned that being a mother also means knowing when to let go, when necessary, but never abandoning. It's being there, firm as a rock, even when you're being ignored or rejected. It's having the wisdom to wait for the storm to pass, trusting that true love always endures. Today, when I look at my son, I see a more mature, more aware, stronger man. And I know that all that pain, in some strange way, brought something good. It taught us the value of each other, showed us that family is forever, even when the path becomes winding. And that lesson, as painful as it was to learn, was worth every tear shed.